We're almost done framing all these walls upstairs here. I've got a few more to go, and I'm going to take you through the process and show you everything we do to build a wall. So the two walls I want to build is firstly one following these chalk lines here, starting in that junction, running through to this point here. That's going to be our solid wall. It's going to have a few special things such as a junction there, which we'll talk about later. Apart from that, that's just going to be common stud spacings. And then we're going to have another small wall through here. And this is going to be the wall that has our doorway in it. So first thing, I'm going to measure the actual size of these walls. I'm just going to decide to run this first one to the inside of this wall. And then when I build this wall, that can run through to that point there. So the inside mark there is 4 meters 92. So I'm just going to write this down on a block. 4092. And then we have another wall here, which is going to go from that point, and it's going to butt into the wall we just marked out, which is going to be to that point there. So this wall is going to be 1210. So these measurements are going to be my plates. Looks like we've gone through all of our long lengths of timber up here today, so I'm going to jump down, cut these, and we'll pass them up. Before I cut these, I do want to check that the factory cuts are indeed square, which these ones are pretty good. So I'm going to hook over there. And that's 409. That's 4092, and we check that one for square too, so we can cut that at 4092. Alright, let's lay these two there, and I'm just going to cut the two at 1210 out of these studs here. We can sit these two right there. Ooh. We're getting a bit of a taste of Melbourne's weather right now. It was pouring down rain a second ago. All the boys have gone home. I've got my jacket on, and now, as you can see, the sun's out, and it's headed up pretty quick too. And now that I've taken the jacket off, it's probably going to start raining again in about 5 minutes. I can see some clouds over there coming this way, so let's quickly frame these walls up. All right, so we have both our plates here. What I'm going to do is sight both of these. I'm sighting them to see if they bow in or out that way. So that one's pretty good. If anything, I can see a slight bow with it going that way. And this one looks pretty perfect to me. So that's great, but since I can see the smaller bow on this plate here, I'm going to sit this one on the bottom and make that our bottom plate, and this can be our top plate. Now the reason for that is our bottom plate's obviously going to be sitting on this timber flooring. So if it's bowed, we can move it back and forth and shoot it straight away into the yellow tongue. And we can put as many nails as we want into that to hold it in place. Whereas the top plate's going to be spanning up there. And eventually we will go through and put trusses on that, and we can either shoot them to the trusses if they're a load-bearing wall, or we can put our brackets up to hold them in place. But there's not going to be as many fixings, and it's not going to be as easy to get them as straight as a bottom plate. So a nice and easy rule is just to always make sure your top plate is going to be straight. Now we're just going to do a temp nail to hold them in place. That's perfectly flush there. So I'm going to go through, nail this in, and just make sure a little bit of it's sticking out there so we can easily go through and pull that out later. At this point too, we can run over to the other side, and that is perfect. We can check that, make sure that is flush, and that we have cut them at the exact same measurement. And I'm going to put another nail here. And we'll do the same thing with our little doorway that we're about to frame. All right, so back to our main wall. I'm going to slide that into place exactly where it goes. We can see there that the measurement's perfect. That follows that chalk line there, and that's exactly where we wanted it to be. And if we have a look in here, it's hard up to this wall. It's also hard up to that wall, so that's great. I'm actually going to go through and mark exactly where it butts into that wall. And then also through the little doorway we're building, this is going to run through and butt into this wall as well. So I'm also going to mark that junction. I'm also going to do an arrow on the top pointing to which way the wall that intersecting is. All right, I'm going to square these junction marks all the way around, and that's going to get us ready to mark out this wall. All right, so firstly, for our junction, what we're going to do is straight away do a tick that way. And that tick is indicating that we want to put a stud in that side of the line. I'm going to do a tick there and also a tick at the end of the wall. Now that stud at the end of the wall is just there to support the wall. This stud on this side of the junction is the important one, because once this wall is stood up in place there, we're going to need a stud at this point here so that plastic can get connected to that. And when it's done, it's going to look like this room in here. 2 studs right in that corner there, so you can screw your plaster in that side and screw your plaster in that side. So before I go through and start marking the studs, I'm just going to check over all my junctions, and we're going to do the same thing here. I'm going to do a stud either side of the junction so that when this wall intersects with it there, we're going to have a stud in that wall there, and our plaster is going to stop there, get screwed to that stud, and on this side of the wall it's going to stop there and get screwed to that stud. I'm also going to go through to the end of the wall here and just put a stud in there. Now because this wall is common, we're just going to go through with our standard spacings, which is 450s. So to start with, I'm going to hold my tape there, and I'm going to try and do continuous measurements like this, opposed to marking 450 like this and moving my tape every single time. Having the continuous measurements just eliminates any room for error. In case I move my tape and I'm not holding it in the exact same place, and then I might do the same thing there, and all of a sudden I don't have the even stud spacings, which will screw us up a little bit later. So I'm going to go back here now, hold my tape there. I'm just going to work it down. So that's 2.7, 3.150, and as we can see, we've got the junction there, so that's fine. And this side over here is smaller than 450. We've got those little small marks now. I'm going to go through, square them across, and like what we did with the junction, I'm going to do a little arrow pointing to which side of the mark our stud's going on. So this wall now, that's all marked out. That's ready for us to open up and start putting some studs in. So for now, I'm just going to move it over to where we have enough room to frame it. And I'll leave it there for a second and we'll mark out for this door. All right, so we're going to have this door centered in the middle of this wall. So we're going to be putting an 820 door in here. And for an 820 door, we're going to have an 880 stud opening, which gives us enough room to put in our door jamb when we're hanging the door. So this wall was 1210. I'm going to mark 605, which is center. And then I'm going to go half of 880, our door opening, which is 440. Hold that on that center mark, and I can mark that side, and then also mark 880. And just make sure it's worked out fine. I can measure from this side. We've got about 164 to that mark, and I come in on this side too, and we've got 164 again. So we know that is centered. So I can square those marks through, and I'm just going to write a D so that I do know there's a door there. Another thing I'm going to do is just a cross on the other side of the door. Now that cross is just asking for another stud there. I'm not ticking it because it's not hard to the arrow. It just means we're going to put that door stud hard to our square line there, and that extra stud is just going to go hard to that other stud. So we will practically have a double stud in there. And then to finish the wall off, I'm just going to tick the end of the wall, meaning that we want another stud flush there. So I'm going to mark 880, so we know it's an 880 door. And we're going to be framing this height for our door at 2.4 to suit a 2.340 door. We'll bring this wall over there as well. We'll open this up to frame it. And once we frame it, I'll actually tell you why I do have a double stud next to the door. So I'm going to go through now and pull out these nails that we put in before. The main reason for the nails is to make sure that when we're marking all of our studs, that the plates aren't going to move and that our studs are going to perfectly line up. So I'll pull that out. And we'll open up this door as well. So I want to make sure I build the wall square. One easy way to do it with the subfloor is I'm going to line this bottom plate up here with our flooring line there. And I'm going to come back. In this case, our studs are 2.6, flooring sheets are 800. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and roughly 200 mil here. And then I'm going to sight through a row of nails and make sure we're sticking about the same distance past the nails, so our wall should be roughly square. So we've got 2603 studs, and I'm just going to double check that opening, and we've got that at about 2630, which gives us enough room to drop the studs in, and then we can close the plate afterwards. We'll do the same thing with this wall as well. Alright, so to open up now, what I'm going to do is just start carrying some studs over. As I said, our stud height upwards 2603, and we've got a few pre-cut over there, so I'm just going to grab what we need. Alright, so this wall needs 6, I'm gonna put 2 there. I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 more. All right, now we're ready to lay the studs in. A few things we want to be really careful about when we're laying studs in is checking for bows. So I'm going to hold it this way. We're checking it the same way we checked for the plates before. This one's great. I want to put straight studs at the end of the wall, and this one's good as well. And I also want to put good studs in where the junction is, because once another wall butts into this junction, we can't get a planer in there to try to straighten that stud afterwards. Now this stud has a slider's bow. It's so small that normally I wouldn't care about this, but the bow is pointing that way. And what I want to do is have the bow facing down. It's a good habit to have the bow facing down on all your walls, especially when I'm building a big house like this. If the bow's facing down, the way we stand our walls will mean that the bow is facing inward. And it's a lot easier and cheaper to go through and straighten your walls just by running the planer over them, rather than putting on a bit of masonite to pack the wall out. These days you're paying $1 for a strip of masonite, so when you don't have to straighten the external side of the wall, it's definitely preferable to have your bows facing inward. This is obviously an internal wall, so we will have to go through and straighten both sides of it. The reason I still have the bows down is I just want to make sure that all the bows are facing the same way. So I do know that when I come to straighten this wall, I put my straightedge on it, and if there's a bow in the stud, I'm going to know that entire wall is going to have bows. So I can just get my planer out and plane those studs, and it means when I go to the other side, I'm prepared to have to pack all the studs that I need. So every time I get a good stud, I'm going to quickly move it over and put it in at the junction or the end of the wall. And that's good as well. Nice. And lucky that one's straight. I missed this junction over here. So that's what our stud layout looks like for a normal, typical wall. We jump over for this doorway here. I'm going to start laying them out the same way. It's going to be a couple studs close to each other in here. All right. What I'm actually going to do is quickly pull out these AND studs, and when we go to shoot it off, I'll show you why. Alright, so we're going to start at one corner of the wall. I want to make sure I'm framing it in a way where I'm walking forwards with the gun. For our very first stud, I'm going to pull it flush, and I do want to push it in about 1 or maybe 2 mil, just so we can see the plate slightly coming past. If the stud was overhanging, in this case, there's going to be another wall butting in there, and it's going to mean that we can't get that bottom plate hard to, which is going to result in our walls being out of plumb. So I'd rather push it in by 1 mil or 2 mil. Put my headphones on, and I'm going to shoot the bottom of the stud first, then remove my hand here and shoot the top. And that reduces any risk of accidentally going quick, shooting the top, and putting your gun like that, where it can potentially shoot a nail into your hand. I've had a couple close calls where a nail has done that and skimmed my hand from shooting it the wrong way. So I'm going to go through to my junction here. I'm going to make sure it's on its line, make sure it's flush, and keep doing that same thing. Bottom, top. Move the hand, shoot the top. And we do want to make sure we've got a good space between both the nails. If we ended up shooting both nails close together like that, the stud is going to have room to rotate. If I shoot the top of it, that's pinned that stud, I can't move it. For this junction on this outside here, I'm going to do the same thing, pull that stud in at about 2 mil. And we do have a 45 mil gap here, meaning we can put a block in. To make that block fit, I'm not going to shoot this to its line, I'm going to pull that away by 2 mil as well, so that they're both the same distance away from the mark, and we can slide a block in there. What I might do is just leave that doorway for a second, and I'll shoot off the other side of this wall. What I'm doing here is I'm putting my foot on the studs, and that's to push it down to make sure they're flush. See there, that's sticking up the slightest bit. I push my foot on it, and that makes it flush. This is going to be quite common because our bows are face down, so it's going to be common that they will have a bit of a rock in them, and you will have to be pushing the stud down. Bit of a quicker way of doing it like this with your foot, as I did show you before. To start with, it's probably best to use your hand, move it around, make sure it's flush. Powder nails again. But you do want to make sure you move it away for that top nail. Sweet, so that wall's now ready for nogs and junction blocks. We will talk about those in a second. Before we do that, let's frame up this doorway. Right, so what I'm going to do here is firstly pull over this door stud to be perfect on its door mark. And I'm going to shoot that one in and this other stud in hard to it. Before I shoot the other side, I want to go through and get a few nails holding them together. And that's the reason I pulled that end stud out, so I could get nails that way and also this way. And the way I'm nailing them is shooting them in a snake bite formation, which is 2 nails, one at the top, one at the bottom. And that does the same thing as what we're looking at before when we're shooting the studs in. It stops the ability for our studs to move or warp. You're locking both sides in and they can't go anywhere. With those shot together the whole way up, we'll go to the top of the plate and we'll shoot them flush with that door mark again. And we'll repeat the process for this side. And then we can add these end studs in. There's that 1 mil there. I've just realised, I don't know how often I'm doing it, but I feel like I keep shooting the top and then the bottom. It's that typical saying, do what I say, don't do what I do. Alright, so we've got all our studs shot in place. The next thing to do is go through and add a row of nogs. Nogs are small blocks that go in between the studs, and they stop the studs from warping and moving side to side, just like this here. These are a row of nogs. So we need to have nogs in a wall every 1350. Obviously these walls are smaller than 2.7, so we can get away with 1 row of nogs. But for the walls I've got downstairs, they are 3 meters. So we're gonna do a double row of nogs. So I wanna measure the middle of my stud. They are 2.6 studs, so we do mark 1300, half a 2.6. I'm gonna do that on both ends. And then I've got a chalk line on me. I'm gonna go through and flick this line the whole way through. There we go. All right, so that's marked where our nogs go. As you can see, we go up and then down so that we can easily get our gun in to shoot that nog there, and we're not having to skew nails. Before we put the nogs in though, I wanna put some blocks in our junctions. These are called junction blocks. Honestly, I probably want them a little bit bigger than that. I might get some ones closer to 300. What are those? 490. Make 1 more of those. Right, these are probably a little bit overkill, a bit too big. But I'd always rather a bit of overkill than something not being right. In this instance here, we've got a wall butting into the junction. So we have a 90 mil junction space. I'm gonna get 2 blocks, we'll shoot them together. They don't need many nails. I'm gonna slide them into that space. Making sure we're putting them in the same way the studs go and not putting them in flat. Because even though these blocks are 90 mil wide by 45, in theory, 2 45s make 90. When you're working with timber, that's pretty damn close there, but a lot of the time there might be a little bit of swelling and you might end up getting 91 mil, sometimes even 92, and that will mean that they'll be sticking out of your wall. So let's get them flush. I'm going to evenly space them out to have even gaps between them. Australian standard says that these gaps can't be bigger than 900. We've got 600, about 450 there, and 550 there. It's gonna make it a bit even, but as you can see, we've gone overkill, that's definitely fine. And then I'm gonna shoot through the stud into these junction blocks. All right, so we'll throw these blocks in too. We've got another junction over here, and then I'll quickly tell you the purpose of what these blocks are going to do later. Alright, so we might jump over here to one of the walls that we've actually stood up, and I'll show you what's happening. We can see we framed a junction here. We've got our stud. It's a bit hard to see, but you've got a double block there and a double block there. You can just see that through there. And if we put our head through here, you can see the stud on the other side. So we've got our studs, which are perfect for plaster. But when we go to straighten the wall, we'll go through and we'll be able to shoot that stud into the junction blocks, locking it in place. And right now, if I was to hit that wall, it's got a little bit of movement. So those blocks are there to shoot the wall into and make it solid. Now we don't do that at framing stage. We will wait until there's a roof on it. It's all been cladded, it's all been locked up so that the weather can't influence the timber anymore. And then from there, I'll check it with a straight edge. It's an end stud, so it should be straight, and we can go through and shoot that off. And then same thing over here. This is the junction, flush with the end of the wall like the other one we're building. It's just got the single 45mm block in there, but it'll be the same thing. We'll check this stud here for straight, and we'll shoot that into the stud and also into the block. You can see it's been even more overkill here. We've done 3 blocks in this one. So junctions are done. We're going to jump on the nogs now. Since this wall is just a typical 450 center spacing, it means by the time we do 450 from one side of the stud to the other, and the studs are 45, it means we're going to have a 405mm gap. So what I'm going to actually do is cut all these nogs at 404. We'll take a mil off them. By the time you join timber together, it ends up swelling up, it ends up creating that extra mil by the time you shoot everything together. And I've done it before with 405mm nogs as a mistake, and by the end of it, you'll have a stud bowed like that sticking out. So I've actually got, I hope, a few 404s pre-cut over here. So we've only got a few left. This is something we go through and cut a lot of while we're cutting all our studs, because we know we're going to go through heaps of these 404s. So I think that should be enough. Obviously the weather looks pretty good now. I think we've actually gone through all of the rain that we're going to get. So that's a 404, 404. Cool. So before I measure any of these other nogs at the end, which are a bit different, I'm going to jump through and shoot these off. The way I like to do this is kick the stud, which means I'll bow it slightly. That means that nog easily fits in place. I'll line it up with that chalk line there, and same thing, we'll snake bite, bottom first, move the hand, shoot the top. Then instead of shooting the other side, I'm just going to walk straight through. It's quicker this way. Same thing, kick the stud, nog on the other side of the line, so we start to stagger them, and then I put my gun in there and do the same thing. And with that side shot off, they should all roughly be in the same place, and I can walk through the other way and just shoot through the face of these studs. Now, if we didn't offset these nogs and they were in a straight line, it means when we try to nail the other side in, it's going to be skewing kind of like that, and it's not as strong as a connection. Skewing kind of like this. So that's our common nogs done. Obviously we've got a few at the end here which aren't 404s because our stud spacing's been broken up for the junction. So what I'll do is just quickly double check that stud, make sure it's straight, and if it is, we'll measure the bottom here. That shows us 249, so I'll cut one at that, and then I'll also measure this space here at the bottom as well, and we got a 321. The reason I measure there is because that stud could be bowing in or out. I don't really care which way those studs bow in terms of in or out, because we're going to fix it all when we put our nogs in. But that's why I measure here, because we fix these off exactly where they need to be. So if I cut the nog at that size, it means it doesn't matter if that's bowing in or out, the nog's going to fix that and get that right to its proper location. We've got some timber over there, so I might jump over and quickly cut those. Another way you could do this if you're a bit more confident on your tools, instead of taking the time to get your tape out and measure the nogs, I can get my offcut bit of timber here, butt that into that stud there, and then what I could do, I personally don't do this, is just sight my blade up with the edge of that stud and cut the nog that way. See, that time it went pretty well. I'm actually pretty happy with that nog, that's perfect. But it is definitely easier not to make them perfect doing it that way. It's easier to make a mistake. That slides in well there, and I've only got one battery up here at the time being. We'll shoot that in. And shoot this side in. And this one here fits perfectly. So that shows that that stud is already straight. Might do a few skews here, just because it is pretty hard to get my gun in on that side. So there you have it, that wall's done. That's how you frame together just a typical 450 spaced wall with a few junctions too. Obviously, we still got this wall over here with the door. Before we do start framing out the header heights for the door, I do also want to put some nogs in here. So I've got 25mm, should be the same either side, which it is. Now for these, typically you're going to rip them. If it was 20mm, we could have got a bit creative and used a bit of yellow tongue flooring and slid that in there. What I might do though, is just quickly get on my saw and rip something at 25. I'm just going to keep it easy for myself. There's heaps of ways you can do this. I've got marks on my saw there for 25. Actually, I'm not going to do it that way. I'm just going to get my speed square. I've got 25 if I put my pencil in there. So I'm going to mark both sides and do 2 cuts. And I think we're going to make these nogs roughly 300. These can be my 2 nogs. Sit one in there, and I'll sit one in here. I'm just going to slide that in there like that. We get a few nails this way. And then we're just going to have to skew through the face. And while I'm here, I'm just going to plant my nail punch straight away and hit these ones in. So that's knocked out. Last thing we have to do is frame for this header. So as I said, we hook over the bottom plate because we will be cutting that out. I'm going to mark, well for starters, I've got a 2-3-40 door. That's what we're going to be using. For your door, you're also going to add in 60mm for your height. So just add 60mm for the width, add 60mm for the height. And that's to suit the jam. Obviously we're going to be building the floor up when we add floorboards, whatever we're going to put on it. So that gives us enough room so that we do have room to put our door in there with the jam. So 2-4, easy measurement there. We know that's 880, so I'm going to cut one block at 880 going across that way. Keep it easy for myself, I'm going to mark where that block goes. So that's 45mm, that's where that block goes through there. And we need a few little droppers hanging down, which is what looks like 20, we'll go 204 for that. So I'll cut 3 blocks going down at 204 and then 1 plate going across at 880. So that should sit in there quite tight. That fits, yeah, really nice in there. That's 203, 203, and 203. In this instance, it makes it easy for us. We've marked centered, so I can just pull that mark through there, and that means our block in the middle is going to be centered with that mark, and we can have 2 blocks on either side. Just hard to. If you had a larger opening for a cavity sliding door, or any other opening, you want to follow that same golden rule as 450 as your max stud spacings. I wouldn't automatically do 450s though. I'd work out how big the opening is and divide it by how many studs you need to put in to make sure that you've got even spaces the whole way through that don't exceed 450. So let's quickly shoot this one together. If I shot that right now, that nail is going to actually push that little plate out there, and it's going to bounce and have a small gap. So this foot's hard up to the bottom of our header. That's going to hold it in place. And once again, I've shot the wrong way, but that's just making sure everything's hard too. I think, yes. I thought I was going to be out of nails and had to run down to the car. It's beautiful. The sun's almost done. We're almost done. Let's quickly shoot this together. Do a face nail through that block there, face nail through that block there, and then we can shoot this up. Beautiful. Very last thing we're going to do before we do go through and stand these walls is I'll get this battery back in the store again, and because this is a doorway, we will be cutting out this plate. Not yet, but what we'll do is we'll stand the wall up. We'll keep that plate in place because that's going to show us exactly the width of the wall. It's going to prevent any mistakes on accidentally making that wall larger or smaller than what it is, meaning that it'll be out of plumb. So we do want to leave this in place for now, but I am going to go through and just run my saw blade flush with a stud. Like that. And that means that when we do go through with a recip to cut this plate out later, it's only on by about 30 or 25 mil, making that a little bit easier and a little bit more efficient. But there you have it. There's how you frame just a common wall and an internal doorway. Pretty good time there. The sun's just about to go down. It's almost 5 PM. That's the time that we can't work past. Hope this video has been helpful. If you do want to learn any other tips or tricks or general framing techniques, I've actually been filming every single day that I've been on this site here. So I've been showing everything we're building while we're framing it and certain techniques that we use along the way. Today's video, we actually got all of these walls up here in the one day, and we also marked out every single wall on the same day too. So if you do want to learn more about framing, I think it would be a good series to watch.